The deep space listening post at Kepler Station had been silent for 3 days. Not the comfortable silence of routine monitoring, but the dead silence that comes when something has gone very, very wrong. Commander Sarah Chen floated in the zero-gravity observation deck, her dark eyes fixed on the swirling nebula beyond the station's reinforced windows. The coffee in her magnetic cup had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. The distress signal playing through her earpiece had her complete attention. Computer, replay the signal. Full spectrum analysis. The AI's voice was calm, almost bored. Replaying intercepted transmission. Source, unknown. Distance, approximately 47 light-years. Signal degradation, minimal. What came next wasn't human. The sounds were too high-pitched, too rapid, filled with harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache, but the universal translator had been working on it for 72 hours straight, and the results were disturbing. Help us. The devourers come. Worlds burn. Billions die. We are the last. If any hear this, the coordinates follow. Sanctuary. Station. Hurry. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. In her 30 years of service, she'd never heard anything like it. The raw terror in those alien voices cut through every barrier of language and species. Whatever was out there, it was scared. And when something that could build interstellar communication arrays was scared, that was a problem for everyone. Ma'am? Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came from behind her. Priority message from Earth Command. They want to know if we've verified. The signal. Sarah turned, her movements fluid in the microgravity. Rodriguez was young, maybe 25, with the kind of eager expression that reminded Sarah of herself decades ago. Before she'd learned that space was vast, cold, and filled with things that wanted to kill you. Tell them it's confirmed, and tell them we need to talk to Admiral Morrison. Now. Rodriguez nodded and pushed off toward the communication center. Sarah remained at the window, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 47 light-years away, something was hunting aliens advanced enough to build space stations. Something they called the Devourers. The smart play would be to ignore the signal. Humanity had enough problems without borrowing trouble from aliens. But Sarah had joined the Space Force for a reason. She'd taken an oath to protect humanity, and sometimes that meant protecting others too. Her comm unit chimed. Admiral Morrison's gruff voice filled the observation deck. Chen, I hope you have good news for me. The President's breathing down my neck about this signal. No, sir, I don't have good news, but I have a recommendation. I'm listening. Sarah took a deep breath. We need to send a fleet, fast as we can manage. The silence stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if the connection had failed. When Morrison spoke again, his voice was careful. Commander, we're talking about an alien species we know nothing about. For all we know, this could be a trap. Yes, sir, it could be. But the signal analysis shows genuine panic. Terror, even. Whatever's out there scared them enough to broadcast a plea for help to the entire galaxy. If something that advanced is running scared, it might come for us next, Morrison finished. Damn, how long to reach those coordinates? Sarah had already run the calculations. With our fastest ships, about 6 months. But Admiral, we'd need to send more than just a scouting party. The signal mentioned billions of deaths. We're talking about a threat that can consume entire civilizations. Another pause. I'll talk to the President. But Chen, if we do this, if we send a fleet into unknown space to help aliens we've never met, there's no guarantee we'll have anything left to protect Earth with. Understood, sir. But if we don't help them, we might not have an Earth to protect. The connection closed, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the endless stars. She pulled up the signal analysis on her tablet, studying the acoustic patterns. The aliens who'd sent this message had been desperate, but there was something else in their voices. Something that made her think they'd been fighting for a long time. Computer, estimate the power requirements for a transmission of this range and clarity. Estimated power output, equivalent to a small star. Transmission duration, continuous broadcast for approximately 6 months. Sarah whistled low. These aliens had been burning stellar-level energy for half a year just to call for help. Whatever they were facing, it was big enough to justify that kind of desperation. Her tablet chimed with an incoming message. Orders from Earth Command. As she read, a grim smile spread across her face. Humanity was going to war. Chapter 2. The Deathworlders. The Terran fleet assembled at Luna Station looked like a collection of flying cities. 47 vessels ranging from massive dreadnoughts to sleek destroyer squadrons, all bristling with weapons that could crack moons. At the center of the formation, the flagship TCS Indomitable stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the final preparations through the main view screen. Around him, his crew worked with the practiced efficiency of veterans. These weren't raw recruits, they were survivors of the Titan War, the Jupiter Rebellion, and a dozen other conflicts that had forged humanity into something the galaxy had never seen before. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Park called from the communication station. All ships report ready for jump. Admiral Morrison is requesting final confirmation. Webb nodded to his XO, Commander Hayes. She was a tall woman with silver hair and scars that spoke of battles fought in the deep black. Hayes had been with him since the Titan War, and he trusted her judgment more than his own tactical computers. "What's our estimated arrival time at the coordinates?" Webb asked. Hayes consulted her tablet. 5 months, 18 days, assuming no complications. The engineering teams have been working around the clock to optimize our jump drives. We're pushing the envelope, but the fleet can handle it. Webb turned to face the bridge crew. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to do something that's never been done before. We're going to help aliens we've never met, fight a war we know nothing about. Some of you might think we're crazy." A few chuckles rippled through the bridge. Webb's reputation for understatement was legendary throughout the fleet. "But here's what we do know. The signal we intercepted came from a species advanced enough to build interstellar communication arrays. They're scared of something called the Devourers, and they're willing to burn stellar-level energy for months just to call for help." He paused, making eye contact with each of his senior officers. "In my experience, when someone that advanced is scared, it's because they've found something worth being scared of, and if we don't help them stop it, it might decide to pay us a visit." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Webb could feel the weight of their mission settling over his crew like a blanket. They were leaving known space, possibly forever, to fight an enemy they'd never seen. "Jump coordinates confirmed, Captain," Park reported. "All ships standing by." Webb settled into his command chair. The leather was worn smooth by years of use, and the armrests bore the dents from his knuckles during particularly intense battles. This chair had seen him through the worst humanity had to offer each other. Now it would carry him to face something worse. "Admiral Morrison sends his regards," Park continued. "He also wants to remind you that Earth's counting on us to come back in one piece." "Tell the Admiral we'll do our best," Webb replied. "But no promises. Hayes, signal the fleet. All ships, prepare for jump." The bridge lighting dimmed as the Indomitable's jump drive spun up. Through the view screen, Webb could see similar preparations taking place across the fleet. 47 ships, 12,000 souls heading into the unknown. "Drive charged and ready, Captain," the helm officer reported. Webb took a deep breath. "All ships, execute jump. Let's go meet some aliens." The stars stretched into lines of light, and humanity's first interstellar war fleet vanished into the void. Chapter 3. Sanctuary Station. 5 months later, the Terran fleet emerged from hyperspace to find a graveyard. The coordinates from the alien signal had led them to a massive space station, easily 50 kilometers across. But what had once been a gleaming monument to alien engineering was now a blackened ruin drifting in the void. Hull breaches gaped like wounds, and debris fields stretched for millions of kilometers in every direction. "My God," Commander Hayes whispered. "What happened here?" Captain Webb stared at the devastation on the main screen. "Sensors, give me a full scan. I want to know everything about this place." The tactical officer's fingers flew across his console. "Sir, the station's been dead for at least 3 months. Massive weapons damage, but this is strange. The attack patterns don't match any known weapons. Explain. The hull breaches are too clean, too precise. It's like something ate through the station's armor. And the debris field? There's almost no wreckage from whatever attacked this place. Webb frowned. No wreckage? That's impossible. Any battle this size should have left pieces of both sides scattered across the system. Unless one side didn't use ships, Hayes said, quietly. Before Webb could respond, the communications officer's voice cut through the bridge. Captain, I'm picking up a weak signal. Source appears to be inside the station. On screen. The main display flickered, showing a damaged corridor inside the alien station. Emergency lightened. G cast everything in a red glow and the air was thick with smoke. But there, huddled in what looked like a maintenance bay, were 3 figures. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with 4 arms and silvery skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Their large, multifaceted eyes reflected the camera's light like mirrors. One of them noticed the signal and moved closer to the pickup. Can you understand us? Webb asked. The alien's response came through the universal translator in a voice like wind chimes. You came. We did not think. We hoped, but we did not believe. We received your distress signal. I'm Captain Webb of the Terran fleet. We're here to help. The alien's eyes seemed to brighten. Terran? You are from the world of death? The planet where poison falls from the sky and the very air burns? Webb exchanged glances with Hayes. Earth's reputation had apparently preceded them. We call it Earth, Webb said carefully. And yes, we're here to help. What happened to your station? The alien's form seemed to sag. The Devourers came. They consumed everything. Our fleets, our worlds, our people. We are all that remains of the Cathera collective. 3 survivors from a civilization of 40 billion. The bridge fell, silent. Webb felt the weight of those words settling over his crew like a physical force. Tell us about the Devourers, Hayes said. The alien's eyes turned to focus on her. They are not like us. Not like you. They do not build. They do not create. They consume. They take everything, matter, energy, even information, and turn it into more of themselves. How many? Webb asked. We do not know. They move as one entity, but they can split into millions of pieces, each piece capable of consuming a ship, a city, a world. They came from beyond the galaxy's edge, and they have been moving inward ever since. Webb's tactical mind was already working through the implications. How long ago did they reach your space? 3 of your years. We fought them as long as we could. Our weapons were useless. Our shields meant nothing. They simply consumed everything we threw at them and became stronger. The alien moved closer to the camera, and Webb could see the desperation in those strange eyes. But you are Deathworlders. You come from a planet that should have killed you. Your very existence is impossible. Perhaps you can do what we could not. Webb looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were all thinking the same thing. Humanity had been called many things, stubborn, violent, crazy, but they'd never been called impossible. We'll need to get you off that station, Webb said. And then you're going to tell us everything you know about these Devourers. The alien's form straightened. Yes, we will help you. But Captain, Webb of the Death World Earth, you must understand. The Devourers are not just coming for us, they are coming for everyone. Every star, every world, every life in the galaxy. Then we'll stop them, Webb said simply. The alien was quiet for a long moment. You truly are from a world of death, it said finally. Only Deathworlders would look at impossible odds and see a challenge. Webb smiled grimly. You haven't seen anything yet. Wire Chapter 4, The Swarm. The rescue shuttle Endeavour had barely cleared the docking bay when the first wave of Devourers arrived. They came not as ships, but as a living cloud that blotted out the stars. Millions of organic constructs, each one, roughly the size of a fighter craft, moved through space with the fluid grace of a school of fish. But these weren't animals. They were parts of something larger, something that thought and planned and hungered. Jesus Christ, the Endeavor's pilot breathed. There's got to be 10 million of them. Captain Webb watched the approaching swarm from the Indomitable's bridge. The 3 rescued Cathera survivors stood beside him, their silvery forms rigid with terror. They found us, one of them whispered. They always find us. Fleet disposition? Webb asked. Commander Hayes consulted her tactical display. All ships report ready for combat. Weapons charged, shields at maximum. But Captain, there's so many of them. Webb nodded. The approaching swarm was like nothing humanity had ever faced. Each individual devourer was small, maybe 20 meters, long, but they moved with perfect coordination. And according to the Cathera, each one was capable of consuming a ship and adding its mass to the collective. They're not just individual creatures, one of the survivors explained. They're all connected. What one sees, they all see. What one learns, they all learn. And when they consume something, they gain its knowledge. Weaknesses? Webb asked. None that we could find. Conventional weapons only slow them down. Energy weapons feed them. Even our most powerful Nova bombs only destroyed a few thousand at a time. Webb studied the tactical display. The Devourers were still accelerating toward the fleet, but they were taking their time, almost like they were studying their prey. What about their coordination? He asked. If they're all connected, there must be some kind of central node. The Cathera exchanged glances. We theorized about that, but we never found evidence of a queen or central intelligence. They seem to operate on some kind of distributed consciousness. Distributed, Webb mused, but still connected. Hayes, what's the status on our new toys? Hayes smiled grimly. The quantum disruptors are online and ready, but we've never tested them against a target like this. Webb had been hoping to avoid using humanity's most experimental weapons. The quantum disruptors were based on technology salvaged from the Titan War, devices that could disrupt the fundamental forces holding matter together. They were devastatingly effective, but they were also completely untested against alien biology. Sir, the tactical officer called. The Devourers are changing formation. They're splitting up. On the main screen, the massive swarm was dividing into smaller groups. Each group was heading for a different section of the human fleet. They're trying to divide our forces, Hayes observed. Classic tactic. Maybe, Webb said. Or maybe they're about to show us something we've never seen before. The first group of Devourers reached the outer screen of destroyers. Webb watched as humanity's most advanced warships opened fire with every weapon they had. Lasers, railguns, plasma torpedoes. The space between the fleets lit up like a star. For a moment, it looked like the human weapons were having an effect. Devourers exploded in brilliant flashes, their organic hulls torn apart by the barrage. But then something impossible happened. The destroyed Devourers began to reform. What the hell? Hayes breathed. The scattered pieces of the destroyed creatures were flowing back together, merging and reshaping themselves into new forms. But these new forms were different, larger, more heavily armored, and apparently immune to the weapons that had just destroyed their predecessors. They're adapting, one of the Cathera said. They learn from every attack. Every weapon you use makes them stronger. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. How do you fight an enemy that learns from every attack? How do you win a war against something that gets stronger every time you hurt it? All ships, cease fire, he ordered. Fall back to defensive positions. The fleet began to withdraw, but the Devourers followed. They moved through space like a living wave, consuming everything in their path. Debris from the destroyed station, stray asteroids, even cosmic dust. All of it disappeared into the swarm and added to their mass. Captain, the communications officer called. Admiral Morrison is requesting a status report. Webb looked at the tactical display. Millions of Devourers were approaching his fleet, and conventional weapons were useless. Worse than useless, they were feeding the enemy. Tell the Admiral that first contact has been made, Webb said, and tell him that everything we thought we knew about warfare just became obsolete. The Devourers were only minutes away from the main fleet. Webb could see individual creatures now, their organic forms pulsing with stolen energy. They looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a shark, all flowing tentacles and razor-sharp teeth. "Quantum disruptors ready, Captain," Hayes reported. Webb nodded. It was time to find out if human ingenuity could triumph over an enemy that had consumed civilizations. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark. Target the center of the largest swarm." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of charging weapons. Webb watched the Devourers approach, his finger hovering over the firing stud. "Mark." Space itself seemed to scream as the quantum disruptors fired. The weapons didn't produce visible beams or explosions. Instead, they created zones where the fundamental forces of physics simply stopped working. Devourers caught in the effect didn't die. They simply ceased to exist, their component atoms scattered across space. For the first time since the battle began, the Devourers stopped advancing. The surviving creatures hung in space, apparently confused by the sudden disappearance of their companions. "Did it work?" Hayes asked. Webb studied the tactical display. The quantum disruptors had destroyed thousands of Devourers, but there were still millions left. And even as he watched, the surviving creatures were beginning to adapt. They were changing their formation, spreading out to minimize the effectiveness of the disruptors. Some were even beginning to emit strange energy signatures, as if they were trying to develop defenses against the quantum weapons. "They're learning," Webb said, "just like they learned from our conventional weapons." The Kithara survivors were staring at the display in amazement. "You actually hurt them," one of them said. "In 3 years of war, we never managed to hurt them this badly." "But it won't work again," Webb said. "They'll adapt. They always adapt." The Devourers were moving again, but now they were more cautious. They approached in waves, testing the human fleet's defenses. Each wave was different, trying new tactics and formations. "They're probing us," Hayes observed, "learning our capabilities." Webb made a decision. "All ships prepare for ramming speed. We're going to give them something they can't adapt to." Hayes stared at him. "Sir?" "They learn from our weapons. They adapt to our technology, but they've never faced anything like human stubbornness. Hayes, send a message to the fleet. We're going to ram them." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Ramming an enemy ship was a tactic from the age of sail, not interstellar warfare, but Webb's logic was sound. It was impossible to adapt to a ship crashing into you at relativistic speeds. "All ships acknowledge, Captain," the communications officer reported. "They're ready to follow your lead." Webb settled back in his command chair. The Indomitable's engines roared to life, pushing the massive dreadnought toward the approaching swarm. Around him, 46 other ships did the same, their crews preparing for the most desperate charge in human history. The Devourers seemed to sense the change in tactics. They began to converge, forming a massive wall of organic matter between themselves and the approaching fleet. "They think they can absorb us," Webb said. "They're about to learn that Deathworlders don't go down easy." The distance closed rapidly. Webb could see individual Devourers now, their tentacles reaching out to embrace the incoming ships. In seconds, the fleets would collide. "All hands brace for impact," Webb announced. The Indomitable slammed into the Devourer swarm like a battering ram. The ship's reinforced hull punched through the organic wall, scattering creatures in all directions. Behind them, the rest of the fleet followed, their ships cutting through the swarm like knives through flesh. But the Devourers were fighting back. They flowed around the human ships, their tentacles seeking weak points in the armor. On the tactical display, Webb could see several destroyers being overwhelmed, their hulls breached by the attacking creatures. "They're boarding us," Hayes reported. "Decks 7 through 12 show signs of breach." Webb felt the ship shudder as something massive impacted the hull. Security teams to the breach points, full combat gear. The battle was no longer just in space. It was in the corridors and compartments of the human ships as crew members fought hand-to-hand with creatures that had consumed civilizations. But the Devourers had made one crucial mistake. They had tried to board ships crewed by humans, beings from a death world where everything was trying to kill them from the moment they were born. "Bridge, this is Security Chief Martinez," came a voice over the comm. "We've got them contained, on Deck 8. But sir, these things are like nothing I've ever seen. They're trying to merge with our hull plating. Acknowledge, Chief. Use whatever it takes to stop them. The battle raged for hours. In space, the surviving human ships continued their ramming attacks, using their superior mass and velocity to smash through the Devourer formations. Inside the ships, security teams fought desperate battles against creatures that could reshape themselves at will. But slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Devourers, for all their adaptability, had never faced an enemy that simply refused to die. Human ships, even when crippled and breached, continued to fight. Human crews, even when outnumbered and outgunned, kept coming. Captain, the tactical officer called. The Devourers are retreating. They're pulling back toward the edge of the system. Webb stared at the display in amazement. The swarm that had seemed so invincible was actually running away. Confirm that. Lieutenant. Confirmed, sir. They're leaving. Webb looked at the Cathera survivors. Their large eyes were wide with shock. In 3 years of war, one of them whispered, we never saw them retreat, not once. Webb smiled grimly. They've never fought Deathworlders before. Recruit epilogue. The long war, 6 months later, Captain Webb stood in the conference room of the newly constructed Sanctuary Station 2. The original station had been rebuilt, but this time with human engineering principles, redundant systems, hardened hulls, and enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. Around the table sat representatives from a dozen different species. The Cathara had spread word of humanity's victory over the Devourers, and suddenly the galaxy was very interested in forming alliances with the Deathworlders. The situation is this, Webb began, gesturing to the holographic display at the center of the table. We hurt them, but we didn't stop them. Long-range sensors show at least 3 more Devourer fleets moving toward the galactic core. Each one is larger than the force we defeated. A representative from the Altarian Republic, a species that looked like crystalline spiders, spoke up. Our military analysts have studied your battle reports. The Devourers adapted to your quantum disruptors. Within hours, they've likely shared that knowledge with their other forces. Webb nodded. Which means the ramming tactic won't work a second time. They'll be ready for it. Another alien, this one from a species that resembled walking trees, interjected. Then, what do you propose? Our combined fleets are powerful, but the Devourers have consumed 17 civilizations. Their numbers are vast. Webb smiled. The same thing humanity has always done when faced with impossible odds. We improvise. He activated the holographic display, showing the current deployment of human forces. We've been building, fast as we can. New shipyards, new weapons, new allies. But most importantly, we've been learning. The display showed footage from the first battle. Devourers adapting to human weapons, learning and growing stronger. But then it showed something new. Humans adapting just as quickly, developing new tactics and technologies to stay ahead of the enemy. The Devourers think they're the only ones who can evolve, Webb continued. They're about to find out what happens when they face a species that's built evolution into their nature. Commander Hayes entered the conference room, carrying a sealed data pad. Captain, we just received word from Earth. The President has authorized Project Deathworld. Webb's smile widened. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet the galaxy's newest weapon against the Devourers. Not ships, not guns, not even quantum disruptors. Humans. Specifically humans who've been given the best training, the best equipment, and the worst possible odds. The aliens around the table exchanged glances. The crystalline spider being spoke. First, you're talking about using your own people as weapons. We're talking about using the one thing the Devourers can't adapt to, Webb replied. Human stubbornness. They can learn from our technology, but they can't learn from our refusal to quit. The tree-like alien rustled its branches nervously. This is madness. You're proposing to fight an enemy that has consumed civilizations using, what? Determination? Webb's expression grew serious. The Devourers have never faced anything like humanity. They've conquered species that gave up when their fleets were destroyed. They've consumed civilizations that surrendered when their worlds were threatened. But they've never faced a species that looks at impossible odds and says, "Try me." He stood up, his hands planted firmly on the conference table. "The Devourers are coming. They're coming for all of us. And when they get here, they're going to find out why Earth is called a death world, not because everything on it is trying to kill you, but because everything on it refuses to die." The conference room fell silent. Outside the windows, the construction yards hummed with activity, as dozens of species worked together to build a fleet that could stand against the Devourers. It was the largest military buildup in galactic history, and at its heart were the humans, the impossible species from the impossible world. Webb looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, the Devourers were coming. They had consumed 17 civilizations, turned whole sectors of space into lifeless voids. They thought they were unstoppable. They were about to meet the Deathworlders, and the Deathworlders were just getting started. In the depths of space, beyond the reach of any sensor, something vast and ancient stirred. The Devourers had touched the minds of their scattered forces, shared the knowledge of their first defeat. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something that fought back with more than just weapons and technology. They had met a species that fought with hope. And the Devourers were very, very interested in consuming that hope. The war for the galaxy had only just begun,